My name's James Hankins. I'm a consulting strategist at Vizer Consulting. And I'm going to build upon what kind of James and Catherine have been saying around changing expectations. I noticed a couple of the questions coming through around the impact on the environment. But there's also an impact upon changing expectations, but also business models and the monetary impact of a lot of these changes. So without further ado, I'll kick off. So some of you will be familiar with this chart. This is the percentage of total all retailing, excluding fuel, including and excluding grocery there. And you can see on the far right-hand side the impact of COVID and how we, as a country, have step changed. We've seen that kind of how many 10 years in 3 months type stat thrown around. We're probably not going back to the levels that we previously saw in terms of e-commerce and delivery and the impact upon that. But it's also worth looking at the actual figures. These are percentage figures. So if all your kind of retail physical stores are shut, obviously e-commerce is going to see a proportional increase. But if we look at the actual figures as well, it's not quite as dramatic. There is still some sort of shift in non-store retail, but it's not as big a leap. And it shows you that actually, as a proportion, there is still a hell of a lot of money going into kind of total retail, kind of physical stores, and how important that is to the UK economy. So with that in mind, you kind of seeing this increase in e-commerce, increase in delivery, kind of what does that mean for consumers? What's the impact on consumers? But also, what's the impact upon the businesses that are servicing consumers? And what we've seen over time is kind of an accelerated change in consumer expectations. The desire for perfect, I suppose. Torval and Christopher Dean from 1984, for those who remember, and call it the Amazon effect. Amazon, there's a lot of talk about Amazon as a retailer. Well, really, they're a logistics business. They're not that great at retailing. They're not that great at customer experience in terms of on the site. But what they do really well is get you your products quickly and when you need them. And that is shifting consumer expectations across a whole raft of industries. It has done, and it will continue to do so. And the impact is quite fundamental to how businesses run, because there's financial pressure on sellers' margins as a function. There seems to be a belief that e-commerce is easy and cheap. It's certainly not. It tends to be negative pressure on margins. If you look at a lot of the big retailers, the Nexts of this world, and you delve into their kind of company reports, you'll find out that the e-commerce operation is actually margin negative. It knocks about 3 to 4 points off their gross margin, and we see that across the board. And actually, the less margin you have to play for, the closer you get to semi criminal activity. You'll have seen the kind of furore over boohoo.com employing or being investigated for slave labour in Leicester. That's because their margins are so tight that some people are kind of overlooking the obvious. You'll see in the furore around Sports Direct, again, margins are very, very tight. And so the growth of e-commerce puts those under more pressure. And that change in expectations is not just about kind of clothing and grocery. It's also moving into the vehicle industry as well, and the motor industry in particular. You've seen the rise of Alex Chesterman, the ex-founder of Zoopla, and also early investor in Love Film. He's moved into the motor industry with Cazoo, and you've got Cinch, the BCA vehicle, and we'll talk about those slightly on. So what we've seen is an increase in e-commerce. What we're seeing is an accelerated increase in people's perceptions and expectations of delivery and service, and that has a negative impact on gross margins and the ability to make money. A great example in the motor industry would be, well, what happens if I go on to, say, Kazoo and ask for my vehicle? I live in Dundee and the vehicle's in London. That vehicle, the expectation is that that vehicle will turn up very, very quickly. Now, the impact is that a local provider can't do that. A national infrastructure provider has to do that. You've got the impact on local last mile delivery as well. And what we're seeing is what we call a stepped impact on marginal costs. You've got to be able to bundle these up so that they make it efficient and effective. It's not as simple as just driving a single car up there. You take a member of staff off the, say, forecourt or your kind of centre to deliver it. That is not appropriate, and it reduces your capability to kind of sell through other channels. So where does that leave us? What are we seeing? Well, there are only two ways to make money in business. One is to bundle, and the other is to unbundle. And this is Jim Barksdale, a very, very famous quote. He was the CEO of Netscape. And what are we seeing that in business with relation to e-commerce? Well, we're seeing specialization or vertical integration, and the two logos that I've put on the screen there are Hyatt, who are a jeans manufacturer who specialize in just producing jeans, the best pair of jeans you'll ever, they say anyway, you'll ever buy. They do that, and that's it. And they kind of unbundle everything else. They focus on just making perfect jeans, and they use APIs to run their finance. They use software tools to run their e-commerce, and they also use fulfillment companies. So they literally focus on what they're brilliant at, and that's it. Everything else is a third party. Or you get vertical integration. I put Booker up here. Tesco are a retailer. They buy and sell food and general merchandise. When they purchased Booker, the obvious solution, or the obvious reading of it, was that they were still a retailer. They were just doing it to different customers. So there is still a degree of specialization, but they are vertically integrating up and down. They have the distribution network that Booker bring with it. So there's an option here that we're finding is that you can either be a specialist, in which case you need to get others doing all your ancillary services, or you become brilliant at everything as much as possible. And how does that fit into this kind of narrative around increasing customer expectations, but also negative margin pressure? Well, as I mentioned earlier, there are two players who are showing the way in motor. And motor is no different. It's being affected by the DTC, direct-to-consumer DTC effect. You've got Cinch and you've got Kazoo. Cinch are British car auctions, the large logistics provider, but also auctions provider. And you can see here that they're actually vertically integrated. And what we're seeing is the sales functions and the car dealerships are being melded into this conglomerate and this vertical integration. If you don't have the logistics back end to be able to get your cars all over the country cost effectively, then you're going to struggle. It's no good having a small regional car dealership or an OEM running a small car dealership network, because they certainly don't have the reach and they don't have the capability to get the cars all over the country to Dundee or to Exeter or back to London, as part of this expectation that the Amazonification of expectations. And then Kazoo with Alex Chesterman. There was a lot of furore in the motor industry about 3 or 4 months ago when Kazoo started buying forecourts. Well, obviously, what they're doing is vertically integrating the other way. They've got a front end, they've got a distribution network that can place cars everywhere, but they're also kind of buying into that physical space as well. And that's what we're going to be seeing over the next kind of few years is OEMs retreating from the sales market because they're specialized in producing cars. They don't want to have the drag, the margin drag that a distribution network causes or a sales network causes. And what we'll see is a movement towards these large umbrella logistics slash sales organizations that are able to push out cars around the country very, very quickly, very, very easily. And to limit the margin negative by having economies of scale. Now, obviously, there is one kind of elephant in the room there, and that is Tesla. Now, Tesla, I think, Elon Musk announced at the beginning of lockdown that he was going to be shutting all his car dealerships and was going to be going kind of direct to consumer 100%. Well, that's not the case. There are still Tesla dealerships all over. They're typically in very, very expensive places as well. They cost them a lot of money. And the other thing is, as much as everyone kind of is in awe to Tesla, they don't actually sell that many cars proportional to the market. And they certainly don't make that much money. This is their last kind of 11, 12 years worth of income, i.e. it's all negative. Now, yes, this year they've started to post positive kind of quarterly results, but this is a function of not just their ability to make cars and get them out there, but a function of that model, that D2C model. It's not quite working for them. It's not helping them make that much money. And they are going to have to kind of work out a route to get this kind of get the cars into people's hands more costly or cost effectively anyway, whether that means that they go into partnership with some of these big Kazoos or Cinches or whoever else develops one of the big kind of sales networks who again vertically integrate. We will see. So that's kind of a whistle-stop tour of what we're seeing within the motor industry. It's very similar to what's happened in grocery. It's very similar to what happened in kind of hard goods, fashion, etc. And it's coming, this D2C pressure, this expectation pressure is coming through. So I summarize very quickly. COVID has accelerated existing trends in e-commerce, and that's accelerated the Amazon effect, i.e. customer expectations. You've got D2C and e-commerce models are typically margin negative, especially in the lower margin, mid to low margin sectors, because of that marginal cost stepping that you get through kind of the distribution network. And unbundling, we see for OEMs, a specialization in just doing cars, producing cars, and a bundling of logistics and sales into one entity. It's happening all over. Tesla are one to watch and potentially learn from, but at the moment their model is still questionable. So yes, that's kind of a whistle-stop tour of the big overarching trends that we're seeing within the motor and logistics business.